Welcome to the 15th episode of Byte-Sized JavaScript. In this episode, we'll continue dealing with the YouTube Data API and fetch some more information about our channel's videos. And since we'll be creating a website eventually, we'll set up a basic web server to test our website locally. So let's begin. If you look at the package JSON, you'll see that we are calling a fetch.js. This fetch.js fetches and caches some meta information about the YouTube videos, as we'll see shortly. So when you go to the fetch.js, you'll see that we are actually requiring a transpiled file, and that file is indeed the transpiled version of lib/fetch. So let's go to lib/fetch to see what it actually entails. So here we have a run function that returns a promise, and we execute the function as soon as we load this module. And inside this run function, we simultaneously fetch the videos that we have cached on the file system already. And also we get the last cached timestamp from the file system as a separate request as well. And then when those two requests complete, we fetch some basic information about the new videos that have been recorded since that timestamp using the YouTube Data API. So when all of these complete, we'll have a collection of the existing videos in our cache and also some basic meta information about the new videos that we get from the YouTube Data API. And that basic information contains nothing more than the video IDs, and we'll use this basic information to get further details about the videos by making separate API requests to the YouTube Data API for each and every single video ID that we have in our collection. And after that, we'll wait for all these API requests to complete by using promise.all. And once we get the detailed information about all the future videos, we will merge them with our existing video collection. And finally, for each tag of each video, we'll link the tag to the video and create a kind of a reverse lookup table. And when all this process is done, we'll cache our data locally to our file system. So let's look at the rest of the helper methods one by one, shall we? The fetch videos from cache and fetch last update timestamp are helpers to read those data from the file system, and they use internally this read file method, which is a basic wrapper around the read method of the fs module, with only difference that our wrapper has a promise interface instead of continuation passing style. Therefore, we'll be using promises instead of callbacks in order to return data from our functions. We also have similar write methods so that we can save the data to our local file system after we do all these computations with it. The getVideos method uses the YouTube Data API to get all the video IDs in the channel that are published after a certain date. And since YouTube returns a paginated dataset, we call the API again for the next page of items once we fetch our current page. And while doing that, we merge all of our results into an accumulator collection and then trampoline that accumulator back into the original function. So what we do essentially is, if there is a next page, we call our getter again, which returns a promise, and we'll pass our next page token and also our accumulator collection by reference so that we can populate it further. And if there is no next page, we resolve our promise with the accumulated data so far. So we kind of create a chain of promises. And if this sounds harder to wrap your head around, you're not alone, trust me. In a follow-up episode, we'll further clean this flow by using async await constructs. So we'll arguably make the code feel linear and easier to track down. So bear with me until we get there. Long story short, once we get and process everything we need, we persist the data into the file system. We update the videos cache and we update the tags cache, and we also update the last modified timestamp that we store in the file system so that next time when we run this method, we won't be fetching the same data from YouTube over again. And this will help us populate our cache incrementally from where we left off whenever we decide to run this fetcher algorithm again. And since we are going to make a web application eventually, I'll probably want this video data to be publicly accessible to my web application, so I'll save it into the public folder instead. Later, we'll be uploading the contents of this folder to a publicly accessible place on the web. So let's run our fetcher. And to do that, we'll first need to transpile the recent code by using npm run watch build, which runs this script as you see in the package JSON. And then we can do a npm run fetch, which also runs another script. So we get an error because we also need to create our data folder in the public directory. So let's do that, and let's also create two files, tags.json and videos.json, to give our application an initial zero state, so to speak. And also I'd like to get notified when my batch operation is completed, so I'll add this info statement to the chain of tenables here. And one final thing, let's also update this timestamp so that our fetch operation can return some actual data from the YouTube Data API. So after we run our script, we'll see that we have tags.json and videos.json populated inside our public folder that can act as our data store for the web application that we are going to build. And before publishing a website, you'd probably want to test it locally. So to do that, I'll install a simple HTTP server module to run a basic server in the public folder. So when we browse into this public folder, so you can see that there is a really simple index.html right now, and there is this error HTML in order to be used when we have some problem with our application. In the upcoming episodes, we'll make this index.html consume our JSON data and then create a fancy UI that you can navigate and browse videos and play them basically. However, for this episode, we'll keep things simple and we'll be enhancing it in a follow-up episode. Oh, there is also this humans.txt in our public folder that will give some information about the humans behind the website, as its name implies. So let's run the HTTP server inside the public folder and see how the page looks like. Well, as you expect, there is nothing fancy, it's just a plain vanilla HTML web page, and it is good enough for our purposes right now. Let's also double check if we can access the JSON files through a web browser. And it looks like we can. And finally, I'll also register a serve npm script so that I can execute npm run serve whenever I need to test the web application locally. And that's all for this episode. To sum up, in this episode we have learned about chaining promises and using an accumulator to aggregate page data that might come from various API services that we use. And we have used the YouTube Data API to fetch and persist information about our channel's videos. And we have also learned how we can set up a simple HTTP server to test our stuff locally. And in the next episode, we'll see how we can publish this website and make it publicly accessible. And also we'll learn how to use a CDN or a content delivery network so that we can help improve our app's performance. So until then, may the source be with you.